Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com, and my guest on this episode is Denis Pombriant. He's a veteran CRM industry analyst and the founder of Beagle Research. Denis is a prolific writer. His works can be found in various forms online, as well as in 3 books, including Solve for the Customer and You Can't Buy Customer Loyalty, but You Can Earn It. Denis recently wrote an article for MS Dynamics World on his outlook about CRM in the next decade, which has been really well received by our readers. And I asked Denis to join us on the podcast to discuss some of those themes further, including the impact that platforms like those at Microsoft and Salesforce are having, the most promising tech opportunities for CRM partners, and how industry-specific CRM might evolve in the coming years. All right, Denis Pombriant, welcome to the MSDW podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our discussion.
So do I. And the reason I invited you, and I'm so grateful that you accepted to join today, was mostly in regard to the really wonderful article that you wrote for our site a couple weeks back, and it hit so many great points and so many ideas that I could identify with and thought were also kind of unique and interesting that I really wanted the opportunity to kind of pick your brain a little further and hear a little more about some of these predictions and observations that you've made. Can you talk a little more about your background and what Beagle Research is all about?
Well, sure. I've been an industry analyst in CRM for about 20 years. Well, actually, this is my 20th year. I got into the space at the old Aberdeen group in Y2K. I was there for 4 years, and I started perhaps the first practice analyzing cloud computing, what was then called hosted CRM. And I've grown up with the industry, had a number of sort of firsts. I was, for example, Paul Greenberg noted once that I was the first analyst to describe Salesforce.com as a disruptive innovation, and I really did believe and do believe that not only is cloud computing a disruptive innovation, but it's actually the ultimate commoditization of IT. So in the last 20 years, 4 years at Aberdeen, the balance at Beagle Research. During the dot-com recession, I went out on my own, and I've always enjoyed the space. A lot of customers followed me. I make my living principally by writing and communicating. So I was just named the number 1 blog in CRM a couple of weeks ago in a survey done by Chris Buchholz every year. So I was very honored by that. But I've always, worked at the margin of the industry, trying to see what was next, whether it was SaaS or analytics or social media. I've always been focused on what's next, what's coming into the suite. I've written 3 books, a couple about CRM, Solve for the Customer. You can't buy customer loyalty, but you can earn it. My new book is about global warming. We don't have to discuss that right now, but it's in the stores.
Congratulations on that recognition from Chris Buchholz. You really do have a great blog, and we'll obviously link it up here. If you're not reading it, it's really worth staying connected with, because I know, especially for someone in my type of situation where I'm sort of looking at software roadmaps and individual features, sometimes you give a great sort of higher level perspective, but it's also very relatable to a lot of the issues that we see. And I think that came through in the article that you wrote, because it really hit on a lot of the themes that I get the sense, and I think a lot of people get the sense that Microsoft really is thinking about, or some of the ways that they're approaching their CRM solution or set of solutions at this point, but not always communicating it in the way that you did. So I wanted to jump into some of those things and how they relate to sort of your larger view. I mean, the first thing that jumped out to me was, and it's something you just mentioned, which is sort of the era of cloud computing, which I guess is not, not new at this point, and you were seeing something very early on about it, which is that notion of commoditization, and also sort of the era of SaaS. I mean, cloud and SaaS are not the same thing, but you sort of see SaaS as a market force, and cloud computing is what more of the sort of the technological underpinning of it. Does one drive the other? Has one driven the other, I guess we should say, over the last 15, 20 years?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is I'm not quite sure how.
Okay.
Sometimes SaaS drives cloud, sometimes cloud drives SaaS. It's worth remembering, I think, that back in Y2K 2001, there was something called, hosted computing was actually a client-server model pushed through a virtual private network. And it never really gained traction. It was inefficient and expensive. Essentially, in client server, you've got a situation where every key click needs to go to the server and be echoed back onto the screen, which is enormously inefficient. And what the early vendors discovered was that they couldn't fit enough users onto a server to be profitable. Things got much better when stateless computing advanced to the point where it became the dominant model for the cloud, and really cloud took off after that. A lot of it can be traced to the Amazon website and the Amazon model for servicing millions of customers at a time, and getting their orders right. There's a lot behind the scenes, but just being able to put your stuff on your screen is a major accomplishment. We shouldn't forget about that. So cloud drives SaaS, SaaS drives cloud. I think what's happening, what happened initially is that SaaS was a set of almost unrelated applications. What cloud computing is becoming is a platform-based next generation of SaaS. Every SaaS application really today needs to sit on a platform that provides numerous services that we typically don't even think about, like analytics, like machine learning, like integration. And I think without platform, the future doesn't make a lot of sense. With platform, everything falls into place.
You've seen that with certain vendors for years. I mean, I looked at Salesforce as pushing their platform as a really sort of smart and powerful approach, and Microsoft has now, I think, caught up to that with their own pretty solid vision. How would you say the sort of maturity between, and maybe any others that come to mind that you think are great examples of platform in terms of maturity? Are there things that you look for?
Well, I think platform has sort of become the religion of the enterprise software industry, and even the SMB industry. Platform isn't necessarily the thing that everybody talks about. Everybody talks about chatbots and machine learning and things like that, but it's really platform that's going to drive things, and those things and many other things, over the next five or 10 years.
I mean, it's gotten. I've actually had conversations, I think, even on this podcast, where guests have said, looking at Microsoft's sort of platform plans, and by that, when I think of platform, I think of sort of the tools to build, industry-specific CRM-based solutions to build, well, even not CRM-based, but other business applications, to open up sort of the types of people who can design them and build them, how they can be deployed more broadly. When you start thinking about the value and the opportunity there, that it almost, and then you look at, Microsoft also has its own sales application, that it almost looks down the road like maybe that's not the goal anymore. I mean, now financially, I think there's probably a different argument to be made about when that is or is not the goal anymore for Microsoft, but is that those first party apps start to look like a whole separate question.
Well, that's an interesting point. I think a lot of vendors, Microsoft included, but Oracle, Salesforce, maybe SAP, and some others are going down that path. And when you look under the covers, there's more similarity than difference. Everybody understands. Certainly, Microsoft understands the importance of giving people the tools to uh, build applications in-house, as well as give partners the capability to build really fine-grained, interesting applications for vertical markets. I was in another conversation the other day, and I was saying that the difference between then and now is that the applications that we developed were basically systems of record, and there are a lot of systems of record out there. And the new tools give us the capability to build systems of engagement. And those systems of engagement are not going to automatically replace the systems of record. They're going to layer on them and access the data from the record systems and just turn the data into information and make that information more accessible to all the people that need it in an organization. So to another one of your points, the CRM apps that we see today are really becoming demonstration projects for the utility of the platform. Hey, look, we did this with the platform. What can you do?
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like there's from your perspective, there's quite a big opportunity still for partners of these platform companies to continue to step up and invest in either versions of the demonstration app or brand new applications that are much more tailored for industry needs, especially. And I think did you point out, or do you have a few in mind that are sort of like the industries that are perhaps the most open to capturing market share with specific sort of tailored applications that meet those industries' needs, rather than that more generic sales or service application?
Well, sure. There are plenty. There's banking, finance, insurance, manufacturing, and healthcare. The thing you have to understand to make sense of some of this is that business agility is becoming the paramount virtue in software and business software, enterprise software. And the way you get business agility is to have a very flexible platform on which to build applications that support your business processes and any changes you need to make to your business processes in order to pursue really short-term temporal opportunities in your chosen market. There was an article in Harvard Business Review not that long ago that talked about the idea that sustainable differentiators are largely gone in business today. And what we have, a sustainable differentiator might be something like your vaunted supply chain, or your financing capability, or who knows what. Those things pretty much get minimized by the internet, by giving everybody the ability to reach out to the world to get the best deals, the best deliveries, whatever you need to run your business. So in lieu of these sustainable differentiators, what companies are left with is the need to be in the right place at the right time with the right products, and you can only do that with flexible software that supports what might be changing business processes to support those opportunities, which all frees up back to platform.
Yeah, I mean, the other, I guess you call it a capability or a type of expertise that I think you've identified as really key in that type of environment that we're in, is the ability to capture more information and use it. Is that one of the challenges you see when you look at companies investing in solutions, the need to sort of ramp up what information they capture and how well they use it?
Well, I'm a real stickler for terminology, and in my world, It's about data capture and turning that data into uniquely usable information for your business. So you might go to a data source and get what looks like information, name, rank, and serial number for a customer, but it's really data until it turns into information that says this person may be an ideal candidate for my new widget. Then you work with it. Then you have something to do.
All right. And just to hit on industry again, I mean, you mentioned obviously some of the big ones. Is that level of industry specific sort of application building enough from a vendor perspective? If you're going to be an ISV going to market, is saying healthcare as your sort of focus area deep enough, or does it need to go to another level or two levels down to sort of that micro vertical type of scenario?
You most certainly have to go down probably 2 or 3 levels.
Mm-hmm.
And the real cool thing, I think, is, we've been trying to do this for, ever since I was in this industry. And people in various industries would tell me, the CRM is interesting, but it's not enough for us. It doesn't have enough. We're going to build our own because it's easier to build our own than it is to modify something that's on the market. Somebody told me that in 2003. Today, with platform and with much better tools sitting on the platform, it's now much easier to take something that was built for, say, an 80% fit and take it all the way there. To answer your other question, though, if you look at something like healthcare, that is way too big and too nebulous to say that that's a vertical. There's
Sure.
there's back office claims processing and all the machinations that go with that. Does the the medical code for the disease entity match the customer's insurance policy, and the doctor's expertise, and who knows what else. There's a lot of AI going on in there, I think. But also, in the practitioner side, there's a lot of systems that were built 30, 40, even 50 years ago. They're still in operation that are really systems of record, and that's what we talked about earlier. These systems of record might be able to capture all of the data from a complete blood count, but somebody's got to put that together and say, this patient's got anemia, or we need to test 2 or 3 other things to make sure this patient doesn't have anemia. And it's in that shift that we're beginning to achieve systems of engagement. That's probably a bad example because a lot of the medical industry, especially hospitals, have done some of that already. Maybe better examples are putting these applications onto mobile devices so that a doctor can walk into a patient's room and have everything about the patient there for them to review and to synthesize ideas and treat the patient much better than waiting for the daily report to get spit out of some mini computer or mainframe.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I keep waiting for, at least in the Microsoft space where I spend most of my time, is there are companies that sort of have developed solutions like that, and they market them across an industry. So I've had guests on or written for us who focus on just the real estate market or on SMB sales. It's not really vertical, but sort of very tailored solution. It's not what Microsoft sales solution is, and it's really geared toward ramping up companies that need that are smaller, that need to start up on using CRM the right way, for example. And there are plenty of others out there for different industries. The thing I haven't seen is any of them really grow to really, I guess you'd call it a notable scale. Not that they're not successful companies, not that they're not profitable ventures, but that they tend to stay pretty small scale. I haven't really seen uh, maybe the blockbuster hit, a vendor become a real phenomenon based on, let's say, the Microsoft platform yet. And I just wonder if that's coming where someone will really establish themselves sort of alongside Microsoft's own CRM, for example. I think is that something you've seen in other spaces, or is that important?
Well, I think it's important, but I'm not holding my breath to see it. What I think we're describing here is, and I think the economics of these situations is highly illuminating. What we're looking at is very thin markets.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these markets might only have white space of say just pick a number, 10,000 users. If you got 80% of that space, you'd be a rock star, but you wouldn't be making a ton of money, especially in a world where you're delivering the application as a service and people are paying you in dribs and drabs every month. You'll make a good living. I don't think you'll have enough there for an IPO, but that's the flip side of all of this technology, all of this platform stuff, all of this ease of use. It gets down into some nooks and crannies that weren't accessible before, but they're nooks and crannies because there's not a heck of a lot of demand there.
Okay, and I feel like also the economics of it really don't necessarily open themselves up. I mean, a platform is an interesting opportunity, but it doesn't sort of economically maybe offer that massive win that you would get if you look at other sort of established, really successful software vendors out there. I don't know how many of them built on someone else's platform to be a winner.
Well, I think that's a future thing. I think increasingly we're seeing ecosystems of partners on various platforms, and they're making they're doing good business. I think that over time, maybe by the middle of the next decade, there'll probably be 5 serious platforms. By 10 years later, you might be down to 3. And I think one of the other things that we've got to prepare for, and I think we're going to see, is interoperability between the platforms through API-based integration. And one of the other things I've been writing about a lot lately is the coming utility formation of information. I think information is rapidly becoming a utility service, just like cable and electricity and telephone, to individuals and to businesses. And I think that interoperability is going to drive, get us through the last mile of that utility formation.
So when you talk about that, is that still staying with the sort of need for maybe a next generation or growth in that integration space? Is the flow of information?
I think potentially, yeah. I think it's also I think it's an important driver for consolidation in the industry as well.
Okay. I guess the one interesting, I was thinking back on what I was saying about sort of business opportunities and platforms. I mean, the one way I have actually personally observed, companies that are real growth businesses, and really kind of accelerating as companies with a lot of big upside, I guess you'd say, are companies that really partner at the cloud level, which is, I think, different from the platform level. So companies that they're tech companies, but they've committed to, say, building on Azure, or they've committed with Amazon to being an AWS based technology business. That's not the same thing as saying we're going to build on an application platform, around CRM and other business applications. Is that kind of a different level from what you were thinking about?
No, I think that is the level I'm thinking about.
Okay.
I'm thinking, yeah, platform for sure. And you can make a very good living being on Azure, or being on AWS, or whatever. whatever's appropriate for the business space that you want to enter into. I mean, I don't know this for certain. I expect though that based on my experience, that there are probably industries out there that Microsoft owns. Maybe they own 80% or 60% of the industry, but they own enough of it that every partner, every developer in that vertical wants to be on Microsoft because they want to take it away as a sales issue, right? They don't want to go into a sales situation and have the customer say, "Well, I like everything about you, but you're on AWS or you're on Oracle or whatever."
Yeah, and all my competitors use Microsoft, and so I want to be where they
Yeah.
seem to think we should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and that raises another question I wanted to kind of get your input on, which was the sort of the role of partners and how they should be transforming themselves. I don't know if you have conversations with those kinds of businesses too often, but say you're a company that's maybe has a legacy of doing CRM implementations, and you continue to do them as almost all business seems to be cloud based now. As 80-90% Microsoft says in its earnings reports are choosing the SaaS service for their first party apps now. If that's where you've made your money over the years, what are some of the places you would recommend that a business like that look for their next big opportunity if they're not just content setting up CRM anymore?
I might look in the area of agility. I'm sure if you've set up a fair number of CRM systems, you've got, if you've got 100 CRM systems out there, you've got 100 different ways to use it. And every one of the businesses that you've worked with has a compelling need to meet changing market demand. And those businesses may not have the capability in-house to turn on a dime, to pivot. And you can do an awful lot of business with those customers as a trusted advisor, bringing business expertise along with technology expertise to that customer's business need. So I think over time we'll probably see a lot of partners transitioning to services, not simply the service of turning on the gear and looking for all the green lights, but services that say, okay, what is the next big thing happening in your industry? How do we help you prepare for that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I wanted to also just get at something that you've written about recently, which really kind of resonated with me as someone who pays for software myself, and something I hear from companies that are out there making decisions about their next software investments too. And that's this, I guess you call it an inefficiency maybe around sort of the need for additional functionality in software, but costs that are out of line with benefits. So you don't see technology making it across an organization. And you wrote about it as a need for licensing to saturate users with the tools that they need. How big a problem is that as you see it? And are you seeing any movement in that kind of conundrum?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember the article. That article dealt with a software company that's a market leader in its space, and they've been around for decades and they've been servicing their customers well, but they've reached a point where in the marketplace there isn't a lot of growth potential. It's become a zero-sum game. I win one customer, I lose another one to somebody else, that kind of thing. And so that kind of business really tries to hang on to its customers and their revenue streams, and they tend to be not really flexible sometimes. with their pricing models, which leaves plenty of opportunity for an upstart to come in with basically the same technology, because it's a commoditized space at this point, and better practices and business models, so that they come in and they say, this class of product for everybody in your organization. Forget this idea of selling per seat. That went out with the first Bush administration or something like that. What's important now is that this technology is so successful that we need to make sure that everybody in the organization has access to it, because everybody needs it. Everybody now sees the value in it and has a job that requires it. So coming in with a new business model is almost as good as coming in with a new technology model. In fact, they're probably equal.
That's interesting. Well, so what do you have coming up as you look down the sort of the calendar for this year? I know you're always writing. You're working with a lot of with vendors in the space, with other thought leaders in the space. What's next on your calendar here?
Well, it's a real mishmash. Thanks for asking. We're coming up to one of the busiest times of year for travel in this space. Every vendor wants to have a user group meeting in Las Vegas or San Francisco or Dallas or Chicago, someplace that's a plane ride. I go to a lot of those. I write about what I see there. I still do a lot of research. I work with other people in the industry, people like Esteban Kolsky, to research specific matters. And we've recently developed a new business model for doing research that has been highly successful. One of the challenges in doing market research over the last decade has been a decline of interest in people taking surveys. You can't beg anybody to take a survey. You can't promise them that their name will be entered to win a Microsoft Surface Pro or anything like that. They just don't care. They're too busy. We've changed the model, and we've developed a way to assure us that we get hundreds or thousands of responses from exactly the people we want in the survey population. So I see a renaissance happening in that. I blog all the time, and I just let's see. My newest book is just come out, and we're about to launch a publicity campaign. I'm just waiting on a 2-minute video to be completed, and then we'll get that out. And I'm working on a new book. I don't want to talk about the new book because it's bad luck.
Understood. Yeah. Well, best of luck with the new book, and do keep me updated as you sort of begin publicity on the latest one too. I'm always interested to hear what's next and what's coming out for you. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. And thanks again for writing the article. Again, for our listeners, I really can't recommend enough that you check it out and hear, in addition to all the other writing that you do on your own blog and elsewhere, where you see the industry going. It's really a great read. Deniss, thanks again.
Jason, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to the next time.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Denis Pombriant for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, please do reach out, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.